Welcome to Unselfishly Me, a podcast all about self-love, self-care, and everything in between. I'm Jane, a personal trainer with a focus on self-love. Each week, we'll be chatting to someone about their self-love journey, how long it took, and what it took to get there. Today on the podcast, I chatted to a very dynamic duo. Their podcast is called The Spiritual Fix. I was so intrigued when I contacted them and started chatting to them on email about what they do. And I've just subscribed to their podcast like straight away. Straight after this conversation, I went and clicked subscribe. I'm so excited for you to hear this. They have such amazing episodes as well. You really need to go and listen to their podcast. So in depth. They are so spiritually connected. I just love the topics that they're doing. And I personally am learning so much from them and just from the conversation that we had that I'm so intrigued to go and learn more. And I think it's so important to have these topics being spoken about by people that actually know things about them, for one thing, but who are also so passionate about it. And you'll hear in their voices, they're so passionate about it. They're so knowledgeable. And I just love this conversation so much that I can't wait for you to hear more. And as always, in the show notes are all the links that you need to go and find their podcast and head to their social media and to their website as well to see what they're offering and to see if it aligns with you as well. I hope that you enjoy this episode. So welcome, ladies. Tell me a little bit about yourselves.
Anna and I are best friends. We have been for a number of years, and we are best friends, especially in kind of the world of spirituality and everything that we're looking in, right? We met at a Vipassana retreat. So we met at a meditation retreat in Georgia years ago. I had to get a ride, so Anna took me down there. And ever since then, we've just been on this kind of discovery journey, being like, oh, what's this amazing new thing that we have? Like, whether it's a new way of eating that, contributes to like feeling balance in the body. And as we both, got married and had kids, like we went through that journey together of like all sorts of different things. And then finally we realized that maybe our text conversations might be interesting to other people. And because I was moving away outside of Atlanta, Georgia, where we're both based in Georgia, we decided it might be a good idea to start a podcast. So we've been doing our podcast, The Spiritual Fix, now for about a year and a half. And we have found that it's a bit of a serial in the sense that it kind of has a journey through, like if you start at the beginning and kind of go through it, you kind of follow the journey that we've gone on, because the podcast has deepened our relationship with each other, but it's also helped us deepen our relationship with ourselves.
I mean, we're also mothers with careers and other interests, and the podcast is just kind of a way to force us to stay connected with each other, but also stay connected with our spiritual practice. Because sometimes you'll get, you'll be in a rhythm, and then you'll take a break from doing shadow work or whatever, love work, whatever, for months, and then you get back on it. But the podcast kind of forces us to monthly or weekly kind of check in and make sure that we're continuing on that path. So it's kind of a good accountability measure, but also in some ways it has become the process itself, because we've learned a lot about each other and ourselves simply from the things that come up on the podcast, or the things that we research to get on the podcast, or the things that we research for the podcast, or the people we interview on the podcast. So it's kind of become its own like meta shadow work process about shadow work.
Exactly.
I love that. I think it's so important. And leading on from that, I'll ask each of you, what does self-love mean to you?
It's a very good question. I am in the middle of doing in America, in Georgia, they recently approved using ketamine as like a psychedelic experience that you can have at home. And and the reason I bring it up is because I've been exploring self-love a lot recently in that context, because I think I intellectually understood self-love, and I would be like, I love myself. And I would say that mantra all the time, and that was kind of it. But kind of going into the deeper self-conscious, whether you're using a psychedelic or hypnosis or anything that kind of allows you to get into that deeper state to like kind of recognize, I've been looking at how for me, self-love is not self-punishment, not self-sabotage. It's almost like finding all the things it isn't in order to kind of find that wellspring of self-love that exists, because there's a lot in my subconscious and in my experience, there's a lot of things that have told me that I need to be a certain way, and then that's what makes me lovable, and that's what makes me worthy of loving myself. And since I'm my greatest enemy, when it comes to that, for me, the process of kind of unpicking and kind of um, you know disarming those kind of anti self-love things has been my method for kind of finding that wellspring inside of me, for what love is. So
Unlearn the unlove.
learn, yeah, exactly. So self-love means to me uh the process of finding unconditional love and what that actually feels like.
And mine, I think it's a little different. Well, it's the same. It's just a different way of explaining it is, to me, love is about acceptance and connection. So it's about accepting things as they are, not as you want them to be, not as others want them to be. And then, connection, going deeper, having my own back, staying true to myself. And my definition of self-love has changed as my definition of self has changed. So Christina introduced me to this concept called internal family systems, which is a whole theory that inside our minds, we have a whole family of beings. And for example, like I have my dragon, she comes out every month around PMS time and she wants to destroy the world. And then I have like my 3-year-old self who wants to please everybody. And then I have my 14-year-old self who can go boy crazy over some idiot, or, I have all these different parts of me, and internal family systems has taught me how to love all the different parts of me. And I've been doing a lot of work of not only recognizing all these different parts inside me, but to have them make peace with each other, because parts of me will exile other parts of me. Like there's this very judgmental part of me who's like, oh, well, you have those kind of desires. I'm gonna push you to the side because that's not right, and I have other parts of me who are like, oh, well, when you don't get what you want, you act like this. No one's ever going to love you. We got to be lovable. So I'm going to exile you so I don't have to be unloved, So for me, self-love has been a journey of recognizing all my different parts. What do they need? How can we fulfill those needs? And how can we stop exiling and punishing each other? That's kind of where I've been. And then, if we talk about the third dimension and the fifth dimension, like the third dimension is everything we can see and feel and touch. Like, okay, yeah, I can love like all the stuff you can see and, myself, my body, whatever. And then fifth dimension would be, my higher self, learning to love all the different parts of me. And then there's sixth dimension, which is like recognizing that we are a multiverse, we are multidimensional, and I can love all the different dimensional parts of me, which are simultaneously existing. Like that might sound a little out there, but all the different parts of me have made different decisions, but also recognizing that if I am part of the multiverse, like everything I'm seeing is part of me. So maybe self-love is also recognizing that I love this lamp because it's part of me. It's part of my reality. I love you because you're in my reality field. Like I walk down the street and, there's this, Matt Kahn has this book, Whatever Arises, Love That. It's like, maybe everything that comes into my reality is sixth dimensional me. And I'm learning to love that.
I think that's so powerful, because the more that we love ourselves and we love those around us, anything and everything around us, the more that they will feel that as well. With humans, like you say, like even if you haven't met someone and you're just sending them love, it also just makes you feel even more love for yourself. So I think that was a really nice way of putting it as well. So what has your self-love journeys looked like?
Well, I could say like we both did Vipassana and tried hundreds of different techniques in the course of, since we started, being on the spiritual track, like in our late teens, 20s. And then we got into the primal wounds, or I could say I'll talk for myself actually, but we've got really interested in the work of, what's her name again, Christina?
Lisa Bourbeau.
Lisa Bourbeau, who talks about the primal wounds. So recognizing the 5 different primal wounds, which are abandonment, betrayal, injustice, humiliation, and rejection. So recognizing these different 5 primal wounds that we all experience and how they come up and how we cope with them are masking, like, and learning to love those wounds inside of us. So self-love has been a lot about exposing the wound in myself, and then recognizing, like, how can I love it and accept it? And originally, I think I came from a very patriarchal view of like, well, there's my abandonment wound. How can I dissect her out of me? Like, how can I dissect this, and how can I heal it? And how can I, you know, fix it? That's the joke of our podcast, the spiritual fix. There's really nothing to fix. Instead, looking at it like, well, how can I love my abandonment wound? Like, how can I love the little girl in me that is wounded? You know, how can I love the coping mechanisms in me that are trying to keep people from abandoning me? And ironically, the more I've come to love the aspects of my abandonment wound, the less triggered I get by abandonment. Ironically, right? You'd think loving it would make it stronger. Somehow loving it feeds it in a way where I'm less destructive. So in my interpersonal stuff. And that's true across the board for all the 5 primal wounds. I think Christina and I have really worked a lot on them, and we often come back to them over and over again. You know, now I've like evolved, then we evolved to like mother wound stuff, and then, you know, internal family systems. But in the end, like, it all kind of comes back to these wounded parts of us. And again, ironically, loving them and accepting them makes the pain of them weaker.
Yeah, and I would echo that a lot. And I think it's an interesting thing because, you know, in some ways our minds, right, like to kind of, it's because, you know, kind of what I was talking about before is that like our mind like to kind of play at self-love, right, in a lot of ways, right? And so it's like, when we have these experiences of primal wounds, right, like we get a feeling inside of us, right, of feeling like oh my gosh, like this person's gonna leave me, right? And then our mind takes hold of that feeling, and then it just goes out of control most of the time, right? It's just like, oh my gosh, I have to go do this, and I have to do this, and I have to do this, and if I do all these things, then this feeling will go away, right? Or I can avoid this feeling next time. And for me, the journey of self-love has been recognizing that I need to go into my body and be okay with how that feels and love that feeling as well, right? So there's the aspect of identifying the shadow work in the kind of mind, as we kind of say, there's like a process of shadow work in which you get access to something. So you're listening to a podcast and somebody brings something up, or you run across a book, or somebody tells you have a conversation, like that gives you access. And then your mind can then expand the awareness of that thing, right? So that you're just like, okay, I'm going to see how this affects my life, right? Like my mind's going to be like, I'm going to be the observer and be like, how much do I show my abandonment wound? And then, or my mother wound, or whatever it is, right? And then the process of processing, there's so many different ways that you can process things. For me, the self-love has been moving my process away from the mind and into the body, and just being like, I'm just going to experience this feeling right now, and I'm going to love myself, and I'm just going to be okay. I'm going to relax my body. I'm going to regulate my body, even though this is a really uncomfortable feeling right now, and it's really scary. And I'm going to it's like 2 different approaches to what Anna's saying with the internal family systems. It's the same thing. It's just taking it into the body as like another alternative, right? Like whether you're looking at an exile or an inner child that like needs that love and support, kind of in that kind of, imaginary shamanic space, right? Which is where we go to a lot of times when we do visualizations. And then they all, and then you can also be like, okay, for me, the practice has moved a lot towards, what does my body feel like right now? How can I be okay with that and love myself, even though I'm feeling like this, and not want to push it away onto somebody else, to blame somebody else for it, to do anything like that, to try and push it away. And then the kind of final step of that process is what we would call remembrance, right? Where you're basically pulling in some sort of greater love that's always there and present, right? Like that's the amazing thing. Like at On Earth, at any time, you have people meditating, doing metta, which is, love and compassion. And you have people meditating with gratitude, and it's just there in the ether, and you can just pull that into your body as a form of self-love, right? To kind of redouble the efforts of and the awareness and acceptance of love in your body. So the journey's been very interesting. Let's just say that to summarize. And I kind of,
I'm like, I can't wait to go and because you said that your podcast now, I'm so glad that you've actually said that, to go from the start. So I'm like frothing now. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna need to find time this weekend to start, but I know that once I start, I'm just gonna listen to all of them. I can't wait to hear, because I think also as a listener now, knowing like your journeys, when you start listening to a podcast, you can always hear how people have changed, like confidence wise and the way they speak and so I'm actually really excited to go and listen from the start of yours and to hear what you guys have to say. I can't wait to learn all the inverted commas woo-woo stuff. Like my jam. I'm so excited. So what self-love practices do you each do every day? I know your mom, so lol. But what self-love practices do you do?
So do you want to start?
No, you can go ahead.
All right. Mine change on a regular basis. I'm very neurodivergent, so for me, I have to like keep it fresh and new all the time. But I would say that at the moment, my self practice is I'm doing a lot of stuff with kind of we have a tendency, especially in the mother wound, the father wound, and the sibling wounds, if you want to call them that, right? Which are kind of all aspects of roles that we choose to take on to become safe when we're growing up, right? And it's oftentimes because we have a lack of, in the mother wound, for instance, nurturance, protection, and guidance, with like a sibling wound, it's something similar, right? Where it's like, maybe they're offering guidance or maybe they're offering camaraderie or something along those lines. Like there's oftentimes a lack of those things. So we kind of create personas in order to survive in the world. And so for me at the moment, I've been doing the self-love practice of basically, what some people call like unenrolling my family from positions of power over me. Right. And a lot of people do that naturally when they're growing up, right? Like that's kind of the process of growing up, right? As you become more emotionally mature, you start to recognize, like especially if you're in a more secure family environment and people are modeling emotional maturity to you, right? Like you're naturally just coming into your own, right? Like that's the definition of like becoming an adult, is I'm just going to come into my own and I'm going to be like, hey, I'm great with the world. And I feel myself, and yes, my family might have some influence over me, or not over me, but I will listen to my family, but they don't have power over me, right? And so when you don't have a model for emotional regulation or maturity in the same way, there can be a tendency to almost have an arrested development in some ways in that respect, right? So for me right now, like I can recognize that, and as I'm a mother doing the work, I mean, it really hastens the work when you're a mother, right? Because you have to, you start to recognize that if you're getting emotionally unregulated when your kids are, then you're not helping anything. Like you may as well just be a kid alongside them. So for me, the self-practice has been unenrolling my family and all these different things, and really like just going into the process of protecting my exiles, my inner children, from kind of embedded voices that have been there for so long and I didn't even notice they were there.
Yeah, I think for me, mine is like a little, I kind of little regimented in the sense that like I try to do 3 things every single day that are self-loving, which is starting the day with a meditation, starting the day with exercise, like feeding the mind, feeding the body, and then eating properly. Like I've just totally been blown away by the relationship between food and hormones and my autonomic nervous system, and just like how important gut health is for my mental health. So like making decisions that are good for me is like how I show myself self-love, because I'm like, well, do I really want to eat that? Well, that might be the thing, the loving thing to do in this moment, but the loving thing to do for the rest of the day and the rest of the month is to eat something that doesn't fuck up my Can I cuss? Sorry. Yeah, fuck up my hormones. So there's that. But then also, like I was talking to Christine about this last night, that self-love isn't about the what, it's about the how. So it's not necessarily about like, I'm going to check mark my box and like go for my loving self-love walk. I'm going to take my self-love bath. Like self-love could be like, I'm going to go watch this serial murderer Netflix binge movie mystery or whatever. And I'm not going to judge myself for being a total sloth. I'm not going to judge myself for ordering takeout. I'm going to allow myself to totally relish and love in this. Or, I'm going to get on Facebook for an hour and I'm going to love that I love this, instead of chastising, well, this is a waste of time. There's so many more things you could be doing, whatever. Like it's about the how. A lot of self-love is about how am I treating myself? Am I accepting whatever I want and need right now as okay versus like, well, that's not very self-loving. You should go take a bath with candles and pray. No, like maybe I just want to listen to, murder podcasts.
Yeah, I think that also it becomes so commercialized when everyone's talking about self-care and making it like a thing. Like even just I find sometimes I call it like my pockets of peace, even if it's 5 minutes and taking my tea outside and listening to the birds or, on the go kind of things. Like for me, I think that's important. It's not about if I don't have time to go for a 30-minute walk. What am I going to do? Okay, well, I'm going to sit outside by myself for 5 minutes and actually, be quiet. I think it's important to decommercialize as well.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And one of the nice things is that if you really want to get into the woo territory of like other dimensional experiences, is that a minute on Earth, if you're sending divine love to your body, a minute on Earth is like an infinity in other dimensions, right? So it's like you make one intention to do something even for 30 seconds and it's expansive in other aspects of you. So, think of it like that, like we're all time travelers. And just setting that intention and attention on that moment is the mind wants to limit it and say that it has this limited impact or that it's not enough or it needs to be whatever, and it's just a bunch of malarkey.
Thank you. I'm going to say that now. I'll be like, it's not just 1 minute. It's actually like a year. That 1 minute
That's
is
right.
Yeah, now
That's
I've
right.
just done a year of sitting quietly.
That's right.
I'm going to do that. Thank you. So what led you to starting your podcast and what all do you talk about on it?
So we mentioned this like briefly earlier, but I think it was mostly just, well, actually the total honest truth is that we tried one time a couple of years ago because Anna's husband is super into podcasting and I had been super into it before. I had done a podcast before on my postpartum depression and kind of like how I got out of that. And I was like, Anna and I once had this session where we were like talking and it was just hilarious because it was just the two of us talking, but there was like no structure to it. And I think her husband went and listened to it because he was like, you guys could probably do a really good podcast. Her husband went and listened to it later and was like, that was just a bunch of chaos. Like, I don't even know what that was. Right.
I don't even remember what we talked about.
I have no idea what we talked about, but then Anna started listening to a murder podcast and she was like, we should do this. So Anna is Anna's like kind of the
okay. So when we recorded our first podcast, I had never listened to a podcast before, so I didn't even know what they were. So then when I listened to a podcast, I realized, oh, there's like an intro, there's a back and forth, there's a story, there's learning. It's like basically reading a news article, or something, or a summary of a book. Like now that I understood what a podcast was, I was like, we should do this.
So Anna's oftentimes the kind of guide in our relationship, right? Like I'm always eager to do almost anything that feels creative or different or whatever like that. And as soon as Anna gets on the train, like we're going somewhere good, right? Because she just has this wonderful guide energy where she'll just be like, yeah, I got this. She has an intensity about her and things like that. And so for me, I can be inconsistent. And so she's so wonderfully intense about whatever she does, even after 18 months of us, doing a ton of work all the time to maintain this podcast. It's been, it's really good. It's like in some ways when she's off, I'm on, when I'm off, she's on. Sometimes we're both off and that's okay too. Sometimes we both don't have the enthusiasm for it, but, that's what that is. So Anna, do you want to cover what we talk about on it?
Well, we talk mostly about, I think our slogan is, there's nothing to fix, the spiritual fix, there's nothing to fix. And it's kind of about, the podcast is basically like, how can we wake up to our most truest self without bypassing and juggling parenthood and a career and living in a politically unstable world, like, so we kind of take things from, Buddha's Dhammapada, or, channeling from Archangel Michael, or interviewing a psychic or an astrologer, or diving into internal family systems. We try to cover so many different bases of like, what is the best and fastest way for us to wake up? And that's going to be different for everyone who listens. And we're willing to try every method. And so someone out there is going to listen to 10 episodes, and one of those episodes is going to give them a method that really works for them. Christina and I have found the methods that work great for us. For me, it's Ho'oponopono, which is radical forgiveness, internal family systems, and feeding your demon, which is a process where you personify the thing that's bothering you and talk to it. So like, we go through different shadow work processes and we give it the summary, and it's great because we get a lot of feedback from our listeners. Like someone has said, oh, I was interested in the drama triangle back in the 1970s, but I never knew how to apply it to my life. And listening to 2 episodes of your podcast, I can suddenly take that vast knowledge and practically apply it to my life, or someone else is like, has texted us and been like, the Dhammapada is so like out there, and like I don't understand the noble truths, but you put it in a context that I can apply when I'm washing dishes and furious, or whatever. So it's like we try to take these large concepts that have been around since the dawn of time, basically, and put them in a way that we can digest them and use them in a practical way when we're having road rage, when our child's having a tantrum, when our husband forgets to take out the trash.
I like to say you're making woo-woo mainstream. Like you're bringing it in and making it mainstream to like allow other people. And like I do angel card readings, which just happened. It was very strange, but anyway, it happened. And I think also because I'm not a typical girl who is like this typical white girl with dreadlocks that is foraging in the forest is who you would expect to do, the whole stereotype. It's like I am more mainstream, and I'm a personal trainer, and people know me from that all my friends and people who book with me, they feel safe because I'm more mainstream than woo-woo, but I'm allowing them to learn as I'm learning, which is exactly what you guys are doing. As you're learning something, you're sharing it as well, and you're making it less woo-woo and more mainstream so that people can, like normal, inverted commas, normal people can understand it in a basic and a simple way and see it's not this out there scary weird thing that is like witchcraft. It really is just normal techniques and things that it is actually quite mainstream when you think about it. So I think that's also what you're doing, is you're making it right. There's something that's super out there, you're actually bringing it and making it more mainstream for people to understand, which is amazing. It is my final event in South Africa for 2022. I'm super excited to announce the Self-Love SAS event. It is something I've been thinking about for 3 years, and I don't know, I haven't had the courage to do it, and now I am so excited to do it. It is for anybody, any woman that wants to learn something new about herself, wants to get in touch with her body, get out of your head into your body. We are going to have a dance teacher teaching us a beginner-friendly, very slow learning from the bottom up, going through each move, learning a 30-minute dance routine. Well, it will be 30 minutes. We won't be going nonstop for 30 minutes. We'll learn how to do a dance routine. Very simple, very fun, very sassy. We'll be doing a beginner yoga flow. So it'll be beginner friendly. If you've never done yoga before, please don't feel like you can't do it. And then we'll be doing a guided meditation, some journaling. We'll do some high tea snacks and coffee, chatting. There'll be giveaway, lucky draw prizes. I'm super excited for this, and it's going to be sassy AF.
I was going to say, Christina and I both have a foot, and you too, we both have a foot in this 3D world where we have to interact with people, we have to make a living, we have to conform to certain rules. Like you're a personal trainer, you're not necessarily going to do Reiki, you're going to have to provide people with scientifically backed exercises. And same with my job. And Christina's out there doing very
yeah, I'm like an executive. I'm a vice president during the day, and then I do psychic readings at night. You know, it's like you can do both. You can have both.
Yeah. And it actually makes you better at your normal job.
And I think some people get turned off by spirituality because they think that they have to completely dive bomb into weird stuff, or or like start dressing like a witch. But like, no, like you can cast a spell in your scrubs.
You know how many nurses, I bet you during COVID, how many nurses are actually like low key were like doing kinesiology and Reiki on people?
Oh yeah.
And
I remember like I'm in healthcare, and I remember a long time ago, like this is when I was still in, I call it being in the spiritual closet. Like I didn't come out of the spiritual closet till recently because I wanted to protect my beliefs, and I didn't want to like have people confronting me and judging me for having out their beliefs. So I kind of kept it to myself. But I remember one time I was in I was in healthcare, and I did home visits, and I go into this patient's house, and it was fucking haunted. Like there was no one on earth that could walk into that house and not come out of there and say it was haunted. And I run into the nurse, like as I'm exiting the house, the nurse is coming in. She just parked, and she's coming in all in our scrubs, And I'm like, do you believe in haunted houses? And she grabs me by the wrist. She goes, I do now. Like, it was just awesome. I was like, yeah, we talked about it later, but yeah.
I think it does. It makes your day job even better when you are tapped into your spirituality. You can help other people. So it doesn't matter if you're a CEO or a vice president, or if you are a personal trainer, or if you're a nurse, or whatever it is. It actually helps you, and it helps you to help other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love that. I wanted to ask, when you were saying about Anna's energy, do you guys know what your human design is?
Yes.
She's a projector and I'm a generator.
I knew it.
What are you?
You could tell I knew the language too.
I'm a manifesting generator.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think my kids are that, right, Chris?
I think
Chris
Abby
did my
is,
kids.
yeah.
As soon as you said she's such a great guide, and I was like, projector.
She's totally a projector, 100%. And it's so funny because whenever I'm like, kind of offering the invitation to her, and I'm just like, all right, Anna, let's get our energy up. I'll give you some of my energy. Let's do this. And you can tell she's just like, I don't want to take your invitation right now.
My husband's a projector and one of my best friends, and yeah, she definitely feeds off of my energy, and then she also guides me with like breaking things down, and it's so interesting. And once you know all your friends, and then my other friend is a generator, like one of my other best friends, and it's just so interesting when you actually know and you can see it. And my daughter, she's just turned 3, she's a generator as well, so it's like I can see the difference in all my friends and all the people. So
yeah, my son is a manifester. Just straight up manifester. And it is so fascinating because the rest of the family is generators, right? Of course, my husband's like a quadruple split, which means that he literally is like, he's so lit up and he's so defined, but he takes like so long to make decisions. But anyway, that's something else. But like the manifester part is just like really, really interesting to see my son, because he will initiate everything. Like he just has these ideas and he's just like constantly initiating, and the rest of us are just like, okay, sure, we'll do that. Let's pick that up, and it's a really fascinating dynamic in a family to see the kids come into their own, especially since we know about it and we're able to support them in whatever that is. So
yeah, I'm single definition, which is, I mean, I love being by myself, so that makes sense. So I'm single definition. She is split, and then he is triple split. So it's like he needs her and I to like finish
to complete a circuit.
Oh, because he's a projector too.
I'm like, okay, bye, I need to go to the Midlands by myself. So I've set these like intentions, which I've been told I must talk about this more, to give other women and moms permission to do this. Every like 2 or 3 months, I will take myself away for like a night to the Midlands. I'll drive to the Midlands. I have like a solo retreat, and I'll go for a night. I actually went for 2 nights this last time because I only went late in the afternoon. I was like, I'm not losing my time. So I went like an hour and a half ago to the Midlands because it's just so peaceful. It's very leafy and it's very like foresty and out of the city, which I think is super important. And so that's how I recharge. Like every 2 months or so, I'll just book myself and I'll go drive. Podcast, hour and a half podcast there, hour and a half of podcast back, listen to podcasts, go meander. There's like little shops and little coffee shops and places, and you just kind of go around. So he loves being everyone together all the time on top of each other, and which makes sense now when we first started dating as well. I was like, whoa, whoa, which now it makes sense. But I'm just like, okay, cool, thank you. I need some time now. Bye to
Yeah.
everyone. So, I love human design. So fascinating.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me
Yeah,
too.
yay. So yay for I knew you were a projector. so now into the
That's hilarious. Yeah, I have a friend who's a project.
it's like you just know.
Oh, go ahead.
You just know when
Yeah.
when someone is something, or I always guess. I love guessing for people now. I'm like,
Mhm.
what are you?
It's really fun. Yeah, I like guessing. Yeah, I like guessing people's signs too.
Yeah, Anna's super into the astrology part. So sometimes like I'll do the human design aspect, and then she'll do just the pure astrology, and it's pretty.
I'm
fun as
a double Leo and Aquarius rising.
Okay. Aquarius rising.
It's a lot.
My sister is an Aquarius with a Leo rising.
Ah.
So yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, the same kind of vibes. It's crazy,
Mhm.
eh?
Yeah.
Oh, I must put you in touch with a friend of mine about astrogeography and all that. I'll
Oh, cool.
send you the info. It's
Yes.
fascinating. So into our meaty bit, which I'm so excited about this topic. When I saw that you guys talk about this, I was like, yes, please. So tell us about the mother wound and how do you heal that? I mean, like, what a big topic.
What a big topic. So the mother wound, it's a big one right now, especially in our country, the United States, where there is mass destruction of the divine feminine, like, Roe versus Wade being overturned and the school shootings and women's rights, like a woman who's pregnant can't get divorced in the state of Missouri. Like there's just all this, there's just all this stuff going on here right now. And basically the mother wound, as we talk about in our podcast, you have your personal mother wound, which is your attachment bond to your primary caregiver, most likely the mother. And then you also have your spiritual mother wound, which is your attachment to the divine feminine, aka chaos. So the matriarchal and the patriarchal spirituality is different. So the mother, the mother with a capital M, she is chaos. She is undiscerning. She is, death and life are all the same to her. She just takes it all and she gives completely without asking for anything in return. Look at Mother Earth, look at chaos, look at Maya, the illusion. And then the father, the patriarchal spirituality is very structured and very rule-based, and it's a totally different thing. And we've been living in a patriarchal world for the last, thousands of years. We've lost touch with that matriarchal spirituality, that chaos, that connection to nature, that rawness, and and it got even worse with the advent of industrialization, because we had to get rid of all of our ties to nature to say, well, this is the smartest and fastest way to, produce this, in terms of farming and canning and making cars and all that. So we've kind of cut ties with our natural raw essence. So the mother wound is not just about healing your relationship with your mother and your attachment style, but it's also about letting the chaos of the mother back into your life, like letting the divine feminine back in. And it can be wild and unpredictable. And it's about feeling your true emotions and getting in touch with your raw creativity. And maybe that's even destruction. Maybe it's destroying something. Not in a violent way. I'm just talking about breaking something down and letting something new come up. And we're so scared of the mother because she is actually so powerful. So yeah, it's a lot about that. And how do you heal it? There's a lot to it. There's a lot about dismantling a lot of patriarchal beliefs that we have about religion, about spirituality, about ourselves, about our identity. It's about letting chaos in, being non-judgmental, like love everything that arises. I was saying earlier, love whatever arises, love that. Like it's about recognizing that this whole world, we're all part of this whole crazy, chaotic world, and I'm not. Yeah, Chris, can you explain what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. I mean, I think you kind of said it in a nutshell. Like that is the greater mother wound, right? Is the entirety of most of the cultures, especially westernized cultures, if you want to say that, like if you want to make a distinction, that have basically have created a rule set and a box in which anyone can have their spiritual practice, and actually and then only the people who are in here qualified, and it's very inclusive or exclusive, whatever you want to say, right? It's basically creating boundaries and making distinctions between the people who can do it and who can't do it, who are going to be saved, who aren't going to be saved, all these different things. And the more that we embrace that mother and that cosmic mother, then that's a huge part of it. That's the greater mother wound. When we go down to the personal level, right, that's where we see what Anna was referencing as attachment styles. So a lot of the time when you can tell that you do have a mother wound is I would say that the attachment style is actually more of a spectrum, right? In the sense that insecure attachment is basically, manifests as a number of different things. It's either like an anxious attachment, which is like a codependency, right? Where you're basically constantly trying to make yourself indispensable and constantly kind of, offering yourself up, but also wanting to be rescued all the time, right? Or an avoidant attachment style, which is basically a manifestation of always trying to be completely avoidant of any feelings whatsoever, right? To, not like secretly wanting love. So maybe sparking a relationship and being like, oh, okay, I'm going to have this love. But then quickly, as soon as it gets really intimate, you distance yourself. You, what I would call distraction bomb, right? You just basically throw things in your relationship so that you don't actually have to be intimate with the other person, right? And then there's kind of then there's the fearful, attachment style, which is kind of a combination. It's very kind of disorganized in the way that it shows up. It can show up as both, or it can show up as anything. So that, we all, that's the insecure part. The secure part is, I can be in a healthy, again, I'm talking about emotional maturity. Like I can be in a healthy relationship and I feel confident in that, and I don't require anything of the other person in that. And I can be intimate and I can show myself, and I'm okay with my emotions and I'm okay with my feelings, and I'm not scared. I don't become stressed out when I experience emotions, and I'm not exhibiting codependency, right? Like I recognize that I'm in an adult relationship, and therefore there's a give and take, and I don't have to overgive to try and get love in return. And so we all exist on a spectrum of this. And so the mother wound is the manifestation of that. And so the mother wound, according to Kelly McDaniel, who writes a book called Mother Hunger, which is specifically geared towards daughters and mothers. But she talks about how basically the three aspects of why we develop these attachment styles in particular, or develop on this attachment spectrum, is that we lack nurturance, protection, and guidance, right? In some form or another, right? So nurturance can be thought of as touch and food, and that's usually very, very important between the ages of, in the womb to 2-3 years old. And obviously this can happen at any time, right? But that kind of nurturance part definitely comes in at those really primal days. And then protection is something that obviously kind of comes in as soon as that separation anxiety happens, right? Like, am I going to be protected? And this is not just physical protection. This is emotional protection too. Like, are you providing either overprotecting or underprotecting, right? Like, are you, because they can both have their own repercussions, right? Because in the one hand, underprotection obviously exposes a child to dangers that they are not emotionally ready to handle, right? And you're basically forcing them to grow up, or you're forcing them to have a traumatic experience that they cannot handle. But overprotection does the exact same thing. It does not allow them to emotionally mature because you are protecting them from everything, right? And then guidance is the last thing that kind of comes in, but it can come in at any point, kind of after, once a kid has a cognitive development abilities to be able to like listen and take advice and kind of change course accordingly once they've kind of met those cognitive milestones, in which 6, 7 onwards, you're providing guidance for what it means to be a person. How do you interact in social situations? How do you create community? How do you show beauty in your life? Like, I always associate like beauty and kind of beauty habits, and like, how do you deal with, going through adolescence? Like, all of those things are the aspects of guidance that we see. And so if you lack any one of those, if you didn't get them properly in whatever way, and not to say that there's like a target and everyone has to hit it, it's a spectrum, and it's very dependent on the kid and the parent and that relationship. But if you don't get any one of those things, then what you're going to experience is a is something on this attachment style. That's the idea, right? That basically the wound, the mother wound, is showing up as the ability of you to take love into your body and feel worthy of the love that you're getting without having to be stressed out about it, without having to kind of compensate for that. So that's a really long answer for what the mother wound is, both cosmically and personally.
I love it. So when it comes to the mother wound, is it anything that we feel towards our mother, or we feel like they lacked? Everyone keeps saying, they did the best, the past generation, they did the best they could with what they had, that kind of stuff, which we all look at and we're like, okay, right. So we feel like that lack of whatever. Is that what you would also, if you're bringing it into examples, like things like that, like maybe your mother didn't tell you she loved you, or maybe she wasn't very physically affectionate. So all those things can manifest as mother wounds that then also would affect your attachment styles in relationships?
Yeah. So we're seeing global mother wounds, right? Not just cosmic, but like personal, in the sense of like the community is experiencing as I mean, that's why it's so fascinating that you see an entire generation of people at this point doing this trauma healing work, right? Like you can hear people be like, oh, well, millennials, they're so precious and they're so entitled. And it's like, yeah, well, that is the product of an entire generation basically going through, like the boomers basically going through rampant divorce, massively high divorce rates, them having to again have that more distance, probably avoidant parenting in general, because they weren't giving it to them themselves. So the work that we do helps us on the personal level, but it's also healing an entire generation of people, so that we're learning. And you know what? 2 generations from now, they'll look back at us and be like, what the hell were they thinking? Yeah, they're going to be that much more ahead in terms of their understanding of how we're actually creating community, because most of that was destroyed. I mean, it's been destroyed, systemically destroyed. And as Anna said, like in the Industrial Revolution and all these different things have basically completely disconnected us from nature, and completely, and having both parents have to work, or having whatever it is, like you have all these different things, which has this repercussion on how children are developing. And we're doing the work now to actually recognize the harm that we've done, because the social experiment has been going on for quite some time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. And then the attachment styles, we touched on that. Do you think that, so is the 5 attachment styles, is it always in like congruence with the mother wound or the father wound, or is it a separate idea as well when it comes to relationships, or is it all mixed with the main mother wound, father wound, etc.?
Well, I think it comes down to basically a lot of this has to do with the autonomic nervous system, right? If you're regulated or unregulated. And when you're unregulated, you can be either mobilized or immobilized. Mobilized is, when you're going, and you're stressed and you're overwhelmed. So you actually put more stuff on your to-do list, and like everyone gets on your nerves, and you're da-da-da-da-da. And that's like the equivalent to fight or flight. And that's, and it can even be fawn, right? Because you're just like, I'll just do everything for them. And that kind of branches, when you're dysregulated, that kind of branches into those 3 things, which can be related to anxious attachment, right? Or even fearful attachment. And then avoidant would be more like when you're immobilized. So that was mobile. So that was mobilized. So immobilized is when you're actually like, I think I'm dead. I don't want to move. I don't want to put on pants. I don't want to eat. And it's an avoidance of life, right? And that comes to playing dead, like that autonomic nervous system thing of like playing dead. And that can also that also goes back to your relationship with your mother or your primary caregiver. And you see it showing up not just with your lover, your partner, your kids, your job. You're going to start to see it everywhere, that like you have a tendency to either go immobilized or mobilized. And sometimes both. Sometimes, some certain things make me feel mobilized, but certain things make me feel immobilized, but my go-to autonomic system dysregulation state is immobilized. And that comes from, being told as a child that I was killing my dying mother, and then I have to do everything to make things right, make her not blow up. Let me try to, all of that. And then, fast forward, I'm in relationships where I'm constantly trying to prove my love, constantly trying to make them love me, constantly finding unavailable people because they remind me of that dynamic as a childhood. I mean, I think any psychologist would say that whatever relationships you're having you can see the relationship mirrored back in your early childhood, like either you're recreating a pattern you're familiar with, or you're recreating a pattern that you want to, or you're recreating a dynamic that you want to fix and save because you didn't get that fixed and clarity and closure as a child. So I definitely think our relationship with our primary caregiver, I don't know if it's one or the other or both, because it's kind of a mix, especially in a modern age. It's like both genders, all genders, I should say, contribute in parenting different ways. But like, I definitely think it all has a relationship with us. But then there's a lot of cognitive dissonance that goes into it too, because you can play the blame game forever. Well, like, I'm like this because my mom did this and she should have known better. And that's blaming. But there's a lot of cognitive dissonance of like, my mother did some horrible, horrible, unforgivable things to me. She did some horrible things I would never do to my kids. And yet I know she also loved me, and yet she adored me. And that's a lot to wrap your head around. And we can't really do it as kids. So we kind of go black or white, like, well, she's perfect, so I must be the problem, or later when you're older, she's the problem and I'm not, but there's something about also being able to hold both truths. Like, yes, this parent really fucked up. And also this parent completely loved us, but they were either immobilized or mobilized.
Yeah, it makes so much sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's also that's kind of the divine feminine that we're talking about, right? Is that the patriarchy says there's only one right? Like that's the masculine is like, this is the answer. This is the only answer. And this is the only answer that's acceptable. But the matriarchy is like, hey, I can actually hold both these truths in my body and it's actually okay. Right. And I need to do whatever feels good for that.
And that's why it's called cognitive dissonance, because it's up here, but it can be true in your body. Both can be true in your body.
Exactly. And we've talked about a lot of different type of wounds just in this podcast. And I think, they're all access points, right? They're all like, and so it's not, Anna and I could sit here for 3 hours and tell you about how they all fit together, because that's kind of the work that we do. We're always constantly kind of figuring out how they all correlate with other things, because that's a really fun mind activity, right? But the most important thing is like, what speaks to your soul? If you want to enter this through the mother wound, then do that. Right. But if feeling rejection in your body and like feeling how you constantly reject yourself, that resonates, enter there. Right. They're all doors, and they're all, and if we were to, one of the things that we kind of have mentioned, we like to use stuff like hypnosis and things like that. And one of the things that we've mentioned with like talk therapy is that talk therapy can be very, very useful for a lot of people to kind of get to the bottom of things. But it is also can be very painstaking, because you're pulling one memory out at a time and you're gaining an insight about it. You're gaining one. It's like basically trying to, empty the ocean with a teacup, right? Whereas like these wounds are like these magnets that just attract so many memories. They attract so many experiences to them, that in recognizing the meta pattern that's going on inside of you, right? Which is, ultimately with the mother wound, you're healing it because you're recognizing that you can provide yourself that you are the parent that you couldn't have. And the same with all of the, and the similar with the primal wounds is that you're recognizing that no one can reject you, right? That you are capable of providing everything that you need, right? It becomes almost like a closed loop, but that can't be an intellectual understanding. Right. And so by getting to that meta core of what we're talking about with these wounds, you release all the memories associated. You don't have to go through each memory one by one. Right. And so that's why these tools are so powerful, because they're just magnets for so many different patterns that you've seen in your life. And if you're really able to understand the core of that, then you can kind of, you can clear the ocean with, massive, with I don't know if you can ever clear the ocean, but it's a bad analogy. Analogy breaks down at that point, but yeah, that's the idea.
Well, like And I think, Jane, like our podcast, very similar to your podcast, is that it is matriarchal spirituality. Like a lot of things we touch on are connecting back to the body. And we also don't claim to be experts. Like that's a very patriarchal spiritual belief of like, he is the guru and he is the master and I will submit to him, or I'm going to have this expert on my show. Like I'm only going to have experts on my show and I'm only going to, provide information that is like double blind research study controlled, all that. And we are matriarchal where we're like, hey, we haven't necessarily figured all this out. We might be a few steps ahead of you in some things and a few steps behind you in others, but let's show you what's working for us. And I think that's how your podcast probably is. And a lot of these female oriented podcast or female led podcasts is we're more just like approaching it in a patriarchal lens of like, hey, let's all figure this out together. Let's heal together versus I've done it. Let me show you how it's done,
Yeah. And I mean, so many people, I've interviewed friends, literally it started off interviewing friends and just people that I find interesting, and they aren't self-love coaches, they aren't wellness coaches, they aren't whatever, but they have a story. And it is when we talk in community and someone says something and how they felt. Like I did an episode with 3 friends. One was fit shamed, one was fat shamed, and one was skinny shamed. And just them in that whole episode telling about their story and how they have felt. I'm like huge on this. I call people out all the time, especially being a trainer. I have trained people that have battled to put on muscle and being called anorexic when they literally are not. It's just in their genes, and like what they've had to do to put on muscle and to eat. And I'm like, this girl had to walk around with a container of rice and chicken and eat nonstop all day. And you are saying that she's anorexic because you need to lose weight in your head and come from the other side. And I'm like, you don't understand what someone's been going through or how they are living. But by telling those stories from people who are not experts and are just normal people and normal women sharing their stories, someone on the other side is going to be listening and nodding and, feeling as if they are seen. So I think it's almost better not to have experts, inverted commas, and to just have normal people on your shows, because it helps you to heal that for yourself as well and feel like, oh, I'm not so alone. It actually makes so much sense. So exactly that. I don't have like proper experts, inverted commas, because I think that we are all experts in our own lives. We're all experts in our own hearts and what we're going through. And no one can tell your story better than you can. So I can't have someone who I think is like, if we think they're an expert, but to someone else, they could be the worst person that they've ever listened to. So I think it is better to have normal, down to earth people that have real and true stories, because that's where the healing happens, is through community, I think.
Completely so. Yeah. It is the community, as I always say, like we're always told that we're the tree. And when you're the tree and you think that you're only the tree, like you think you're like the lone tree sitting in the field and all you have is the sun and the water. If it rains, what are you going to do? Like, where are your resources? Like, what happens if it rains, it doesn't rain for too long, or you don't have the right fertilizer, right? We think that we can come in and humans can intervene and like feed a tree. But like a tree that exists in a forest, which is what we live in, right? We are the forest. Like there is no tree. Like it is like, you look at the forest systems and the roots are connected. Like literally different species are connected in their root systems, right? Like there's no distinction between this tree and that tree and whatever it is. And they're providing for each other continually, right? And the more we can pull ourselves into that understanding, the more it doesn't feel isolated. We don't feel isolated in what we're doing. And we recognize that the work that the 3 of us are doing on any given day for self-love is actually feeding the forest. It's feeding everybody. Right. And that's how we can, and sometimes that motivates me when I don't want to do it. Right. When I'm like, I don't want to feel self-love today. I'll just be like, all right, so I'm doing this not just for me. Right. Like this self-practice is helping my kids today. Right.
I love that. Yeah. And sometimes when we think of it in that way and you think of it for other people, it really does motivate you to do it. It's so weird how we'll do it for everyone else, but not for ourselves. But whatever makes us do it is
right. Right. And then that's how we build our self-love, is we start to recognize how much we benefit from it too. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So what is your favorite thing about the work that you do?
For me, it's meeting the people that we get to meet. And like, for me, I get an extra added kind of bonus in the sense that like, I have clients who come from the podcast. So basically it's like, it's amazing because they know so much about me, right? Like they've listened to the podcast, so they kind of do all that, and so they come to me with the understanding of like the framework in which kind of we're going to be working together. So I do that I get from people, right? And that people are kind of doing the work simultaneously that we're doing on the podcast is so wonderful for me. And to be able to see people's growth and be able to see that I've literally had a couple of people, since it's been long enough at this point, that people who came to see me last year, and we had like 4 or 5 sessions, something like that. And like sometimes they'll just like schedule a follow-up and they'll just be like, my life is great. And I'm like, that's so amazing. I don't know what it is, but it's great. And that's so fantastic. Like it feels so good for me. That's my motivation, obviously, because I have kind of the added layer of the psychic thing. So Anna, what about you?
My favorite thing is actually being able to have an excuse to hang out with Christina. And
Dang,
call
I should
her.
have said that one first.
And no, it's okay. I'm the codependent one here. Like Christina and I communicate on our iPhones, and like I message each other about, our friendship stuff, but then on WhatsApp, we communicate about the podcast. And so it's like I get double the messages from Christina in my life because of the podcast. So I really love that. And I always joke that like when I see a voice message from her, like when you give a little clip and it says like a minute long or 40 seconds or whatever, I'm always like, it's like, well, I'm not even Christian, but I'm like, oh, it's like Christmas. I'm getting to like open up a little like stocking stuffer like in my day. I just love hearing her insights or advice or even her chaotic,
my chaos, yeah.
whatever. I enjoy it. So there's that. And then I think second also, I don't give readings like Chris. I don't do the coaching calls or anything, but I love the people we meet on the podcast. Like one of the people that interviewed us last year just came to visit me in Georgia last week. We stayed in touch and getting to meet other people and the people we have on the show. They're like, we had someone on our show last week named Joyce
Anastasia.
I always get it wrong. Joyce Anastasia. And we had an episode on near-death experience. And in her 3rd NDE, they said to her, would you like to go back to Earth? If you do, we're going to give you a download of psychic gifts. But it's going to be difficult at first to like navigate that. And so she gave us each a free psychic reading at the end of the interview. And it was like crazy accurate. She knew the ages of my kids. She knew like all sorts of details about my life. And it was awesome. And I'm like, I never in a million years would have ever talked to this woman, let alone like thought to get a reading from her. And then I got a free reading. And then, now my husband's going to book a reading with her, so we get to meet really interesting people because of this. And I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's also for me, I'm in little old South Africa and I get to talk to, like lately I've been interviewing so many people from the podcast group from, like getting to interact with you guys. And it's mostly like Canadian and American. And there was like one person in Australia so far. That's been so fascinating. I think it is. It makes the world smaller, which is so nice. What was I going to ask you? There was something I literally was going, the iMessage. Okay, so interesting that a lot of American people mostly iMessage. And I don't know if it's because there are more people using iPhones over there than like here, for example, it's cheaper to have like an Android. So iPhone, a lot of us do have iPhones here, but not as much as I think in America. Do you use iMessage and then split it with WhatsApp as a boundary for your work versus friendship?
Yeah. We had to learn that lesson the hard way because we were kind of blending them together. And then the whole second season, if you listen to the second season, we talk about the drama triangle.
We got in a huge fight.
We got in an absolutely huge fight. And we talk about it a lot. And you can hear it in those episodes because we're still in the middle of the thick of our argument when we're going through some of these episodes, right? And it was my husband who basically was just like, y'all need to separate these things. Like, you need to have a very clear line between these two things. Like, you're saying things to her in a quote unquote business context that you would never say to your colleagues. So why are you doing that to her? And I was like, but she's my best friend. I should be able to tell her. He's like, no, you would never tell somebody about, you would never start to complain about like whatever work or whatever thing like that in the way that you are in a work context. So separate them out and be professional in this one channel, right?
So
like,
WhatsApp
really
is like, podcast stuff only.
Yeah.
And very, very polite. Just kidding. We don't really argue that much. And then I message just like whatever. My day, her challenges, my challenges, whatever.
I love that.
But yeah, I think probably like 99%, I don't know what the ratio is, but everyone, I think 95% to 99% of everyone I know has an iPhone in the US.
Yeah. I think it's a lot.
They're the same price as Androids, I think.
Yeah, and it's a lot cheaper over there. Whereas the import here, I mean, our exchange rate with the dollar now is 17. So it's like massive. So if you came here on holiday, you'd be smiling.
Oh yeah. Maybe I'll bring some iPhones to sell.
Yeah. That would be great. Can I put my order in? Thanks.
Yeah.
So clever. Oh my gosh, I love that about boundaries. So what is one thing you wish you could tell younger you?
I kind of like all the mistakes I've made, so I don't know if I want to actually like give her any advice for like what to avoid or what decision not to make, because I feel like they all led me where I needed to be. I might just say like, you're okay and you're going to be okay. Maybe that, like, just some reassurance. But yeah, like, be so cool to be like, get into the primal wounds now, get into the trauma triangle now. Like, you're going to save yourself so much. No, but like, I had to go through what I went through to be who I am.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's true. I it's funny because Anna and I, when I guess it was, oh my God, it was so long ago now. It was like 8 or 9 years ago now. We both had a Shakti pot experience, which was like it's an opening of your Kundalini from a master that used to live here in Atlanta, like 2 blocks from where I lived. It was very strange. But and Anna and her husband knew him first. And one of the things that he said is that, you know, the work that we had done in Vipassana with meditating had been the framework that we needed, so that we didn't need to do like kind of the typical preparation that he would do because we had done this other piece. And so, you know, everything in our path is in our path for a reason. So if I were going to say anything, I would just be like, you're worthy of love. I love you. Something along those lines, right? To just be like, you know, just to give that, because that's what I do to my inner children all the time, right? I'm constantly being like, I love you. I'm here for you. And if I could just give myself that much more love then, so that I could feel it in real time back then probably that.
I love that. So is there anything else that you want to end off with, to share with the audience about anything that you do? If you want to tell them about your psychic readings?
Yeah. I do, if you go to my website, which is chriswiltsey.com, which I will spell as KRISWILTSEE.com. I do readings for people. And they kind of go along the lines of, it's very conversational in the sense that like, I'll answer questions and do that, but we're looking at blocks, we're looking at things like that. And that's just something that I do, but we at TSF have a lot of different products, especially geared towards the mother wound. Anna, do you want to talk about them?
So you can find our podcast at thisspiritualfix.com, this, and then spiritual fix, all one word. And we have all our podcast link there. And then we do have like a shop. We have some free hypnosis that we give away and different meditations. We've got a package on each of the primal wounds. And then we have a mother wound course, which is like a 12-week course on really kind of breaking apart these attachment wounds and understanding them and healing them and journaling about them. But like, I think that for anyone listening, if you've enjoyed Christina and I's contributions to Jane's podcast, I think you would like our podcast. And to start at the beginning is really the best place, episode 1, season 1, or some people jump ahead and start at episode 14 of season 1, where we start with the primal wounds. And then from there, it just kind of all is sequentially like an onion, peeling. So,
yeah. Yeah. And we even also have a smaller mother wound course too, which we call like the Mother Wound Light, for those who don't necessarily want to do the entire full one, so that you can do one. And it has a lot of still has all the same tools, and it has a lot of things. It just has like slightly less prompts so that it's not so overwhelming, but it's all really good resources for how you can go into those wounds and how you can really experience a relief to the kind of onslaught of what may feel like bad behavior, but that's obviously a judgment, which we don't encourage, because it's all about self-love.
Yeah. I love that. So they can dip a toe. You can, it's a, the dip-
Yeah, they can get like the main meat,
Yeah.
without the details.
Yeah, I love that. I didn't even know you did that. This is amazing. Fantastic. Yes, I'm going to link all the websites and everything in the show notes. And I am going straight to episode 1. I'm going to start right at the beginning and I want to hear it all unfold. And I love that you gave us a little insight about boundaries and your little fight and everything, because now I'm going to be like listening in.
Yeah, you're gonna love the fight in season 2.
Yeah, it was funny. I had a friend who was like, he's a friend of mine, and he was like, you seemed really like kind of insecure, like you were saying earlier, like the my voice in the podcast changed so much as I've done this work. And he's like you should be bigger after listening to season 1. And then he goes into season 2 and listens to the fight, and he's like, okay, I take that back, like you're good. Like
Okay, now I'm intrigued. Okay, I'm literally going right now. So everyone go subscribe to their podcast. And yeah, just thank you so much for giving me your time. I love meeting you guys and chatting.
Yeah, thanks for having us, and enjoy your one-on-one retreat with yourself.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna start planning my next one. That was in like end of May. So I'm coming up.
You're ready.
yeah,
I'm ready. August.
Yeah.
I'm gonna plan like Women's
Awesome.
Month. So thank you guys for joining us. I'm going to link everything in the show notes so you guys know where to find them. And I will see you all next week. Thanks for listening to Unselfishly Me. Follow us on Instagram at unselfishlyme and check out our website www.unselfishlyme.com.